Welcome to Want More with Dr. Moore, the criminologist of the Bay, where we bring you stories and insights at the intersection of justice and society. I'm your host, Dr. Talia Moore, and today's guest is Mr. Terry Wiley. Tune in for this audio version and recording of my interview with Mr. Terry Wiley. Welcome, Mr. Wiley. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
So, just want to kind of give you an overview of what to expect here. I'm going to ask you some questions really to inform the masses about your professional career, your
Mhm.
aspirations, anything new on the horizons, and any information and insight that you can provide in regards to the criminal justice system and really, any systems overall that you may have information about. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Ready for the ride?
I am.
All right, well, here we go. All right. So, first question, really want to ask about your professional journey. I know you have a long history in working in prosecution, and really what initially drew you to the courts and overall to your career at this point.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the Bay Area, and specifically, I grew up in San Jose, California, down in the Silicon Valley. But when I was in fifth, sixth grade, and the civil rights movement was going on, including the Black Panthers in Oakland and the free speech movement in San Francisco. And a lot of these things were in the were centrally focused on the nightly news. And it's kind of watching these events unfold and the role that Dr. Martin Luther King was playing in just the overall civil rights movement. Then the history that I knew of Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, all of that kind of attracted me to say one day I think I want to be an attorney, and uh, then that became more into focus when I was about 14, and at about that age, I decided, okay, that's absolutely what I want to do. Now, how I wound up practicing in the particular area of law is a little different story. Um, I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, and as I was, kind of getting through undergrad, I remained focused on, well, okay, after I finish my education here at Berkeley, I want to go to law school, and not really thinking about what kind of area, what area of the law I wanted to practice in, because I came from a large family, very, very, let's say we were a family that struggled from check to check, and um, there wasn't a lot to go around. And so my thoughts initially were, I wanted to go out, and if I practice law, I wanted it to be something where I'm making money, and uh, but again, I didn't know what that was going to be. And then when I finally got into law school, in about my second year, I said, well, I'd like to get into an area where I can try cases and become a trial lawyer and then take those skills into private practice. And then because I had heard that, if you're a good trial lawyer in private practice, you can make a lot of money. So then one day I walk up to a professor and I said, hey, so where's the best place to start if you want to be a trial lawyer? And the professor told me, well, the district attorney's office. And, I said, you mean like Perry Mason, when you watch Perry Mason, the series and the prosecutor, that he said, yeah, exactly. I said, okay, well, who's got the best prosecutor's office? And so the professor said, well, a really, really good office in California is the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. And I was like, oh, Alameda County. I said, well, I went to Berkeley for undergrad. And he said, well, that DA's office is one of the best in the state. So I said, okay. And so after I got out of law school and, took the bar, I just kind of cold called them, and just because I was going to law school in Southern California. And I said, hey, who does the hiring there? And they put me in contact with the hiring DA. I talked to him on the phone, and he said, "Well, yeah, okay, I'll interview you." He said, "But this isn't really how we hire." And so I flew from Southern California to the Bay Area. I went in and interviewed with him, and they almost made me the offer before I even got home, you know.
Mhm.
And so he evidently liked what he saw, and I got hired. Like I said, I almost got hired on the spot, but they had to at least make it seem a little like, they weren't overly excited. And so the next day is when they formally asked me, "Well, when can you start?" So that was how I started in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, and then I soon found out why it was considered such a good office, because I was very shocked by the quality of the lawyers there. Like, it was really high quality. Like there were a lot of good lawyers working there. But and an interesting thing, one of the lawyers that was in my law clerk class when we started was Kamala Harris.
Oh, wow.
So me and Kamala started together in the district attorney's office, and so we were the only African Americans in that particular class that started at Alameda County. And yeah, we worked together for 8 years in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office.
Wow.
So
That is really inspiring. Outstanding. Okay. A cold
yeah,
call did it all. That's really
a cold
interesting.
call.
That's interesting,
Yes,
taking the initiative, and just trying. And I will say
yes.
this, go Bears. Maybe
Go
that had a little bit to
Bears.
do with it.
Go Bears.
Okay, so can you share some of the key positions that you've had in your roles and really talk about how you prepared or how you were prepared for those positions?
Yeah. So, what I would tell the students in your audience, I thought like one of the things that was very helpful is um I knew what I wanted to do. Like, I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer. So, and in a district attorney's office, that's what they look for, are trial lawyers. And so they never found me running away from any challenge, because I was there with a purpose. Like, I wanted to go to trial, develop myself, because I thought ultimately I was going to leave and go into private practice. So I went in with kind of a fearless attitude about all aspects of the job. And what I noticed was that that people love that. They see, and this is one thing I will tell students with lawyers. If one day you want to be a lawyer, the bosses don't really like lawyers that they have to babysit. They like what are called self starters. Um, because supervisors like very, very motivated self starter type of people. And if they have to like kind of, and of course, when you're just starting, yeah, you do require some input and guidance, but they only want to go so far with that. And you have to be kind of a self starter. And you find that a lot of your most successful lawyers are really self starter kind of people. Like, they will take the initiative, and they're very determined, very hardworking. And I was that kind of lawyer. But now, and in all honesty, Alameda County tends to be very selective with who they bring in, because it was so competitive to get in there. And so you found that a lot of the people you were working with were also very, very self motivated, very smart, and very skilled individuals. And so you're just surrounded by that type of lawyer. Um, so you're constantly pushing each other, which is why it was a great environment to start your career in. And
Okay.
then I think your question was this. Well, and let me just add that. So, my first 3 years, you end up trying a lot of misdemeanor cases, and then you move up to felony preliminary hearings, and then eventually felony trials in about your fourth year, where you're trying murder cases and some of the real serious stuff. And then you just, it just goes on from there. And I would also say this, like once you reach a point in your career, and this applies if you're in civil practice with a civil law firm, or in a, or the public defender's office, the district attorney's office. The best advice I got was from a DA who said, try to get assigned to as many different positions as you can, because the more versatile you are, the more valuable you are to the organization. And so I proceeded to take like the next, 5, 6 years, and I'd work an assignment for, 9 months, 10 months, and I would ask for a transfer to another assignment. And then I'd stay in that assignment for 9 or 10 months and ask for a transfer to another assignment. So by the time I got to 10 years in the office, I had done a lot of the assignments. And then I became what was called a fixer. So anywhere there was a problem going on in the DA's office, they said, just send Terry Wiley over there. He'll fix it. And so I found myself in between year 10 and year 15, all my transfers were me being transferred to a different location to like fix an operation. So, and it was great. It was a great experience, great people. And now you notice I said 10 to 15 years, because when I originally started, my plan was to go there, stay for 5 years, become a trial lawyer, and leave and go into private practice. Well, when I reached that point in my career, I found that what I didn't know about the district attorney's office was, one, um, district attorneys have a lot of power. Like they have a lot of power. And uh, and the people that are exercising that power have to be individuals who know how to exercise good judgment. Because you make decisions that can impact somebody's life. So you have to be a very responsible decision maker when you're making those decisions, because you know that it can impact somebody's liberty. It can impact whether they go home to their families or whether they stay in jail. So you got to have individuals who have very good judgment, and you have to be the kind of person that doesn't mind making difficult decisions. And so I began to see the impact that you could make in the community positively from that role. And that's one of the reasons I stayed as long as I did, because I thought that, it involves the safety of the community. It involves helping someone who's been victimized, help them put their lives back together, um, and, try to make them whole again so that they can move forward. And there's a lot of positive things you can do to help people.
Well, I definitely appreciated the response. I also really like when you say like diversifying your skill set, right? So picking
Mhm.
up, learning, taking new opportunities to try something new, even outside of your comfort zone.
Right.
Definitely skills and things that we champion in our classes, but just to hear someone as accomplished as you to really echo that, I think is also really important to note as well. And then being able to be identified as the fixer in the department, right? That is actually
I was definitely one of the fixers.
one of the fixers. Yes, yes, yes. And I mean, it's actually, a lot of respect in just kind of conceptualizing what that looks like, being able to come in with a skill set that other people may not have and be able to resolve issues, because this is a big, like you said, this is a big office.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that is important. I definitely, echo those sentiments as well. All right. So I have a question about some of the challenges. So, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced professionally? And this could be cases, people, personalities,
Yeah.
changes in law. I don't know, but just some examples
You
that you.
know, as an African American who grew up in the Bay Area, I can tell you that one of the challenges when I got there was, and you don't notice it uh, initially when you get there, because when you first get there, you don't know anything. You're just trying to be able to put one foot in front of the other, learn the job, be able to go in and perform competently. So you're kind of really distracted by the job itself. But then you hit a point where, okay, you now are in your comfort zone. You know what you're doing. Uh, you really know how to practice law on your feet, and then is when you begin to pay attention. And so when you're sitting in court and you go into the courtroom at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you work in that particular courtroom all day, and all day the only people you've seen come out of the holding cells are African American or Hispanic. And that I'm like, okay, I've been here all day, and that's all I've seen come out that side door. That's when you begin to understand that, wait, there's something not right with this system. That I'm sitting here in court and all I'm dealing with are African Americans and Hispanics. So what you begin to understand, you get a fuller picture of the system, and then you can begin analyzing the system and making suggestions that can change things. So even though I was in my maybe fifth year, um, I would see the kinds of cases that the majority of people were coming in on, and then we began to have discussions with judges, and ask, well, can we create a mentor diversion program? So even though the law says that, if you get convicted of this particular drug offense, for example, then this is the prescribed punishment. Can't we create a mentor diversion program to have them, successfully complete the mentor diversion program and reduce the charges on that particular case? And so that and I'm not taking credit for anything. Those are just the kind of discussions that you can have, and those were some of the discussions that were going on in Alameda County. And a judge by the name of Henry Ramsey was the judge that actually came up with the idea of doing mentor diversion. Judge Ramsey used to be the dean of Howard Law School, and and in fact, his son Ishmael Ramsey is now the U.S. Attorney of the Northern District of California today. Um, but he's the one who started Oakland's mentor diversion program, and what we found was that was a way to um, have individuals who might be caught up in the criminal justice system find an alternative to being incarcerated and being able to divert themselves out of the criminal justice system. And so um, those are things that, that were happening. Um, but I would say the biggest thing that happened was in 2013. um, they needed me to go fix our juvenile division. So I was told, Terry, we need you to go to juvenile, take over juvenile, and we need you to, um, you know, go over there and kind of fix what's going on over there. And I was lucky in that I was paired up with a public defender, um, who was someone that we had always worked very well together over the years. And she was supervising the public defender's office, and I was supervising the district attorney's office. And so we got together and we just looked at the Alameda County juvenile system and said, look, we've got to come up with some some way to keep these juveniles out of the system. And so we would do like we would find out, like, why are so many of these kids coming to court and then being put into custody? So what we found, for example, was the juvenile hall in Alameda County is in San Leandro, up on the top of a hill. And the buses didn't really run regularly up to the top of the hill. Well, a lot of the kids that are in the juvenile system, it's not unusual for neither them or their parents to have transportation, and they have to use public transportation.
Right.
So we start realizing that some of the kids were coming to court late because there was no public transportation up to the juvenile hall. And then when they finally got there, the courts were putting them into custody because they were late. So we created a system to deal with that. And we saw the number of people that were putting into custody dropping because we dealt with that. And we were also very, very upfront with the judges to say that, part of the breakdown in the system are you guys. You guys are the ones that are not taking the time to talk to folks and find out why they're late. And you're just saying, oh, okay, you got here late and you're putting them into custody. So we got the judges to actually take a different approach also with the way they were dealing with people that came into their courts. And so the end result was today we have juvenile departments all over the state of California asking to come and look at what Alameda County does with the juvenile system. So yeah, I'm very proud of where they are today because that was some of the work that we did that here we are more than 11 years later, and we're seeing the fruits of the changes we made to the juvenile system in Alameda County back in 2013. So you can have a real positive impact on the community. And then throughout my career there, I rose all the way up to chief assistant district attorney.
Yeah, that's outstanding. I really, as a former probation officer myself, I supervise juveniles and adults, but I'm a huge advocate of diversion. I know the impact of it. I know the benefit of it. I know in regards to long terms, having cases reduced and charges reduced, what that looks like. So just,
Yes.
can definitely appreciate that. And then just, listening, it's really about like cultural competency, right? When we talk about
Yeah.
like travel, and I mean, who knew that that
Yes.
was an issue? And to a judge, I can see where they may interpret that or misinterpret that as being disrespectful. And on the
Yes.
client's end, they're just like, we barely made it. Do you know how hard
Yes.
it was to get here? And then to
Yes.
have that as a consequence. I mean, so those are the needed discussions when we really think
Yes.
about like justice reforms. What does that look like? And that's just a conversation. Right?
Yeah.
That was a conversation to be had. And I mean the benefit to people and having a reduction in minors coming into custody. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And cultural competency is, I mean, God, that's sometimes that's the whole ball game. You
Right.
know, I remember, I'll just tell a quick story. I was in court and they brought in a black female juvenile. And I'm sitting at the DA's table and I look over at her and something just did not look right. Okay, like I'm like, okay, what is she doing here? Like she did not look like part of any criminal element. And so I walk over to her defense attorney and I said, so what's the story with your client? And like, why is she here? I mean, I knew what the charges were, but like, what's the backstory?
Right.
So before we could even finish the conversation, the judge comes out on the bench. And I said, well, Your Honor, in this particular case, I'm not satisfied with what the backstory is with this minor. And so I think we need to take some time and kind of get the backstory and see what's really going on here. So the court said, okay, fine. And so we sit down with the defense attorney. We sit down with um, her parents, her mother.
Okay.
And so what we found out was she was being teased at school because of the way she smelled. People were teasing her that she smelled bad. And we asked the mother, well, anyway, the long story is that the mother never really instilled in her that she needed to bathe every day. You got to get up, you got to brush your teeth, you got to bathe every day. The mother was so overwhelmed that she didn't instill that in her. So I said, well, what is it that's going on at home that you're so overwhelmed? And why is she missing so much school? And so what we found out was her two younger brothers were autistic, and the mother had to go out and work and make a living so that they could survive, but she had difficulty finding childcare that were equipped to handle two autistic boys. So they would make the daughter miss school to take care of her two brothers. So we got down to the bottom of it and we're like, okay, this family needs resources. Like the mom needs assistance with childcare for the two autistic brothers. Um, the daughter needs, some skills development
Right.
in terms of just hygienes and let's try and get her on a positive track. And so as a district attorney, it can be something as simple as just looking over at somebody and saying, okay, something doesn't look right here, and you can change the whole family dynamic. And it ended up changing the whole family dynamic. They were able to get the two boys into programs uh, that assisted the mom with the boys' autism. They got them into the right schools. Uh, she just blossomed once they got her into um, a a class where they focused on etiquette, and she was able to just turn her whole self-esteem around. And those are just the kind of things that you can do as a district attorney. And I know a lot of times people think, well, the district attorney is just like the police and they just come down on people and they put people in jail.
Yeah.
It's way more to the job than that, like much more.
Well, that is a great example, really just talking about the interventions that are available, ways to help.
Hmm.
I do have another question for you, and really kind of building off of where you just left off. Um, because there is an inherent distrust in our law enforcement and really the justice system
Yes.
overall, between the community. What are some ways that you think that those trust issues or breaches can be repaired?
Well, I think it took a long time for uh, America to understand that the negative impact that over incarceration was having on uh, particularly communities of color. Um, where there were for example, for drug offenses, the penalties for drug offenses were so tough, and it resulted in so many black and brown men being pulled out of the community, and single mothers being left to take care of their families because the husbands and the men had been pulled out of the community for, in many cases, low level drug offenses. So I think one of the things that you will see today is that there is the system is much less onerous on drug offenses, from the standpoint that whether you agree with somebody having marijuana on them or not. In the days when I was a young prosecutor, having a marijuana on you could get you 90 days in jail. You know, whereas today it's decriminalized. And so I think that there have been laws that have passed that have assisted, like with the decriminalization of marijuana. Other crimes are on a much lower level, and there's much greater emphasis being placed on rehabilitation as opposed to what we call retribution. So what I mean by that is that when I started as a DA, society was like, okay, if you commit a crime, we're not seeking to rehabilitate you. We're seeking retribution on behalf of the community for the crime you committed. So there's no focus on rehabilitation. It's just going in and doing jail time. And that created the over incarceration, particularly of Black males. Whereas I think that today, the system is much more set up to focus on rehabilitation. Like there are many more resources that are put into the system to, if even if someone does go to jail and then they're released, there are now services and resources to reacclimate that person back into the community, like helping them find a job, helping them go to job training, those kinds of things. So I think a lot of those things have contributed to a huge improvement of the criminal justice system. However, I still think that many of the hurdles that um, Black and brown men in particular face today have existed since time immemorial. I still think that some of the educational systems that they come out of have not properly prepared them for the next level. You look at what's going on right now in the public schools around the Bay Area, in San Francisco and Oakland. They're talking about shutting down schools because the school systems have multi-million dollar deficits. Oakland's talking about closing 10 schools and or combining two schools. The disruption that causes to a student's life and the disruption it causes to learning um, has a tremendous impact on the education of these kids. And where we see the biggest impact is, you know, when they're later in junior high and high school, and they really haven't had that top flight education at the elementary level, and we see a lot of it play out, particularly when you're in juvenile. So it's a complex problem, and that's why the answer is a little more complex, because it's just not as simple. It's economics, it's social issues, and when I say social issues, there are the systems of education don't work that well. That has an impact on some of the economic viability of being a worker, because most jobs you have to be able to read and write, and to get a good construction job, you have to have a little bit of math, because you got to measure, you know, you got to measure things. So you got to have some math in order to get some of those jobs. And so, um, so that I think all of that, it contributes to the complexity of the problems that, we have to address. And I think sometimes society wants, um, they want the probation department to take care of all that. And the probation department can't take care of all that. They can't improve the school system, you know. So anyway, I hope that answered your question.
That did, and it really kind of speaks to like the overall information content of the podcast, right? Really the interconnectedness of the systems and how
Yes.
they impact all the systems in totality.
Hmm.
Um, as a person who graduated school in San Francisco and now my school is closed, or one of those combined schools that you talk about due to
Yeah.
low test scores and low resources, it definitely resonates with me when you talk about that. And I mean, just thinking about like the school to prison pipeline and how we are already kind
Yes.
of setting people up in those situations and then are surprised at the juvenile level when they are introduced
Right.
into the system and what that can really materialize into. So no, I definitely
Yes.
hear that, and that is, I'm so glad that you said that, because I say that all the time. One system
Yeah.
connects and they're all interconnected, especially when you work with young people. um
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely, definitely. All right. So I have a question about accountability, right? When we're talking about the relationship dynamics between communities and the justice system overall, how are people accountable, or how do we find these hold these systems accountable
Yes.
for any injustices or missteps
Yeah.
that people may encounter as a result?
Yeah. And that's a great question, because I think that when you look at the criminal justice system, that has been one of the biggest issues that still to this day is one of the biggest issues when you talk about the criminal justice system. And and just to give you an idea, if you ever get a chance to go back and just listen to some speeches by Martin Luther King that he was given in like 1963, 1964. And one of the main things he talks about is the police brutality that is being suffered by the Black community. Then you fast forward to I remember listening to Richard Pryor, who's a Black comedian, for those of you who may be too young to know who Richard Pryor is. Well, Richard Pryor would put out these these comedy albums. Today it would be a comedy CD. And he put these comedy CDs out like in the 1970s. And if you listen to them and listen to his uh, uh, comedy skits about the interaction between African Americans and the police, and it's like what it really speaks to is police brutality. And so today, fast forward to today, the biggest contributor to accountability of the system has been the body worn camera. So, when you look in many communities, Black communities in particular have complained about the way they were being treated by police departments, but nobody believed them because nothing was on video. So it was the police officer's word against the citizen's word. But with the body worn cameras now, so much of it is caught on video that uh, large segments of the American society, um, half of which always believed the police and didn't think it was going on, now everybody in America knows that it goes on. And that has led to um, an increase in the accountability of law enforcement in terms of the way they operate within particularly minority communities. So, for example, my job today is I'm the Inspector General of San Francisco. And so San Francisco created my agency to conduct oversight of the San Francisco Sheriff's Department. And so, for the most serious offenses that the sheriff's department employees are accused of, instead of the sole investigation belonging to the sheriff's department, which is basically the sheriff's department investigating itself, and police agencies don't really do a good job of investigating themselves. So, San Francisco created a third party agency, which is my agency, the Inspector General's office, to conduct those investigations. And so we come in and we do objective investigations of complaints against sheriff's deputies. Um, Once we complete the investigation, we have to determine, okay, is what the deputy is accused of doing true? And so we either sustain the complaint, or in some cases we find, no, this isn't a legitimate complaint. Take a look at the video. But if we do find that an officer has uh, gone over the line and we sustain the complaint, we then make a recommendation to the sheriff for discipline. So, and the recommendation can be anywhere from we're recommending termination all the way down to we're recommending that this officer go through some retraining, or we're recommending that the officer go through retraining and 30 days without pay. So the discipline that we recommend is, it's pretty varied. And then again, the sheriff of San Francisco can say, I agree with that. And that's the discipline that we're going to implement. Or the sheriff can say, well, although this is a serious violation, I don't think it rises to the level of termination. This officer didn't really have any past incidents of um, this kind of conduct. So we're going to do this instead. So, but the result is that you see a department today that is very conscious of of their interactions with the community and with the citizenry, because they know that people are looking, and and then the effect that it has on the community is they now have a place. If something happens to them, they have an objective third party they can go make a complaint to. um, and so this all gives the community a greater feeling of accountability, that people in the system are being held accountable, and then you start seeing that they have more confidence in the justice system. They have more confidence in interacting with law enforcement, and some of the interactions are more than the only time I have any contact with a deputy sheriff or a police officer is when they're trying to arrest me. And so we really try to emphasize to law enforcement, you got to have more contacts with the community, and because it can't always be the only contact you have with them is when you're trying to arrest them, because they're never going to trust you long term if that's the only interaction you have with them. And so I know for a fact in San Francisco, the sheriff's department does a lot of community events. You can find them at almost any festival or any event where they're interacting with the public. They'll have a booth set out, and they're always recruiting. They're always trying to recruit, and a big part of what they do is go to different events, and they have their recruiters out there trying to recruit people to come to work for the sheriff's department. Because at the end of the day, these are actually very good jobs. San Francisco sheriffs are some of the highest paid in the country. Um, San Francisco Police Department. I mean, those guys average about $200,000 a year, so they're very well paid.
You touched on a couple of things I think is really important. Really, the accountability piece. A lot of times we hear about incidents in the news,
Hmm.
and oftentimes people are left to believe that there's no accountability. And so having an entire organization established in San Francisco that really monitors that, and knowing that there are
Yes,
actual consequences and repercussions for people's actions,
yes,
um, regardless of their title or positions, is really, it should bring some level of comfort in knowing that there are accountabilities that are being extended to people and consequences that are being extended, um, to these various
yeah,
positions. And so it's good to hear that. And now you are the Inspector General here. That is quite the title, and really,
yes,
I imagine quite the responsibility as well in
yeah,
that role.
yeah. I mean, it's a new agency, and I left the district attorney's office after running for district attorney and losing that race in San Francisco. Was like, we can't believe Alameda County lets you get away, and so they just swooped right in, and now ended up becoming the inspector general of San Francisco, and but in March of 2024, I was also elected judge in Alameda County. So uh, I have the option of taking the bench in January as a new judge.
Great, great, first world issues to encounter here, but
Thank you.
congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Um, just kind of thinking, one, I wanted to just touch on your response in regards to the fact that these jobs exist in these respected positions, right? A lot of times we don't talk about that or acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of opportunities for people if they choose to go into these respected positions, law enforcement, the sheriff's office,
You know
the
what's
DA's
nice,
office. Yeah.
doctor. You know what's interesting is that when I came out of law school and I started as a district attorney, I was thinking about money, but I was thinking about money down the line. I didn't really think about like how much does the district attorney's office pay. I wasn't really looking at it like that. And when I started, our pay was like it was okay. Um, but uh the legal market in the Bay Area changed rapidly. So salaries for private firms just started skyrocketing. And so, in order for government agencies like the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, and county council, these kinds of government jobs, they were having a hard time recruiting because so many of the law students were going to these six-figure jobs. So, what we noticed with the prosecutors' offices and the government offices, there was like a rapid increase in the pay. So that today, if you start off in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, within a year or two, you're at $300,000 a year. So you're these jobs pay very well, and they're also the other thing about government jobs is, and I know that many of the students aren't thinking this far ahead, but they come with a pension. And a lot of your jobs in private industry don't come with a pension. And so you have to really kind of rely on the stock market for your retirement. And whereas these government jobs, there's a great pension. You're making $300,000 a year, and they're really really good jobs. And I know that a friend of mine, a district attorney friend of mine, his brother was a captain in the fire department. And because the fire department, people think that firemen, they go put out a fire, and other than that, they don't really do a lot. Well, firemen is actually are subjected to a lot of dangers because they go to fires where it could be a chemical fire, and they might have to ingest some poisonous gas or something. It's a difficult job. But the point I'm making is they generally get to retire at the age of around 50 years old, and their salaries, those pensions are always upwards of 200 and something $1,000. So imagine being 50 years old. And so for the rest of your life, and the average that people live to is 87 years old, you get another 37 years making 200 plus thousand a year. And that's just going to bed and just getting up and breathing in the morning. So these are great jobs. Police officers, although those jobs are demanding, but they do very well in terms of their retirement, and police officers have to work overtime. And so, for example, there's a deputy sheriff in San Francisco who's got the record because he works more overtime than anybody else in the history of the sheriff's department, and he's been averaging about $500,000 a year as a deputy sheriff. Now, I'm just like, he must have no life. But because see, 500, that wouldn't be worth it for me to work all that and not have a life outside of work.
Yeah, yeah, that is something. That is all the money, no time to spend
No
it. But
time to spend it. Yeah, I was
right.
just like, okay, that's a little overdoing it. But they're great jobs, great opportunities. You do have to, like, okay, I'll tell you one thing we have noticed about the current crop of college students is that, so when I was in college, okay, there was no internet. If you went into the library to do some research, you literally had to go to a stack of cards to find the book you were looking for. Then you'd have to go find the book. Whereas today's generations, everything is right at your fingertips. But the impact that was of what was going on when I was growing up is that you had to interact with people. Like you had to be able to talk to people. You had to be able to walk up to the librarian and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a book on this particular subject. Where do I which cards do I go look at to find that book?" You're constantly everything you do in life. You have to interact with people, and those interactions prepare you for the work world. Where you're doing a lot of interacting with people. And so today, like if I am, in fact, I'll give you an example. I took my nephew out to breakfast last Saturday and we go sit down at the table. And so I'm asking him questions, but the whole time his head is down and he's in his phone. And I have to keep telling him, "Hey, Francois, why don't you answer my question?" You know? So, um, one advice I like to give to today's generations that you have to be ready to interact with people, you know, because the ones who can interact, the sky is the limit for those, and I get it. It's tough. It's tough because you guys have so much information that's right at your fingertips, and I know I'd be in the same boat. I'd be online. I'd be doing everything, interacting with my friends, sending DMs to my friends because I do it now as an adult. But in the real world, and especially as a lawyer, you got to be able to communicate. Um, whether it's verbally, whether it's in writing, you have to be able to communicate and interact with folks. So
Great advice. Great advice. Yes. The value in a conversation and interaction is immeasurable,
it
actually.
is.
Yeah, one of those soft skills that employers actually really seek out. And like you said,
Yes.
because the technology, everything is a swipe away, right? We can swipe this and get that and everything, but
Yes.
that the quality of the conversation to be had really is a skill set to continue to be cultivated and developed for
It
sure, for
is.
sure. All right, so Mr. Wiley, I have just a couple more questions for you. And again,
No
thank you
problem.
for your time and your knowledge that you're imparting upon us here.
No problem.
So given your different career, spaces and professional jobs that you've had or positions that you've had, really, what is your future when you think about the justice system overall for Alameda County, Oakland, San Francisco, and any of the other spaces that you may have occupied in that
Yeah.
space?
First of all, I think that well, there's a couple of things. One, I think it is extremely important that uh, the more diverse our system of justice and all of our systems are, uh, the better those systems are going to be, and there's going to be more trust of those systems. Uh, because I know uh, that it's important for systems to look just like society. And the Bay Area is a very, very diverse place. Uh, there everywhere you go, it's a very diverse region of the United States, and I think that the more diverse our systems are, the stronger they're going to be, and because people will have greater trust in those systems. But where I think we are today is, I think, with the George Floyd case, uh, and Benjamin Crump, the attorney for the Floyd family, is a really good friend of mine. Me and Ben kind of came up together in the National Bar Association. So we've known each other for years, and we have a lot of conversations about our criminal justice system and just a lot of our systems. Yeah, and so I think we went through a period after George Floyd where people were demanding a lot of changes to the system, and I think a lot of places responded. Um, but I think, like, for example, in the Bay Area, and I'm saying Oakland in particular, their crime just seemed to it was just out of control. I know I personally had my car broken into 3 different times, and I hadn't had a car break in 30 years of working in Oakland. And then in 2023, every time I turned around, somebody was bipping my car. Um, and it was happening to everybody. Um, and I think that we are hitting a period where, the communities and society is demanding a correction. Because I think that particularly in the Bay Area, I think the Bay Area is always going to be in favor of, you know, uh, offering diversion programs, offering alternatives to incarceration. But what they're now saying is we're okay with that, but we also want to see people some accountability. We don't want people to be committing crimes and then nothing happens, because we're just seeing the same thing happen over and over again. And I think that is what contributed to some of the recalls that happened in Oakland. I think that the voters and I think these communities kind of want a do over. They're like they want an opportunity to, like, okay, let's do a reset, and we're okay with the programs, but we do want to see some folks held accountable for just some of the really serious crimes that are being committed. So I think that's one place we're headed, and that people do want to see, because what's going on right now in Alameda County, San Francisco's already gone through it, and so Alameda County is a little behind San Francisco, because San Francisco, uh, if you today, San Francisco is where I just said they're fine with diversion programs, they're fine with alternatives to incarceration. There's been toleration of the homeless, but the voters are now demanding that stuff be cleaned up, and they want this. They want to take the city back so that people can walk down sidewalks without being accosted. They want the city to get the fentanyl drug under control, because fentanyl is destroying a lot of lives in San Francisco. Oakland and Alameda County wants to see uh, they want to see more accountability, and they don't want to see the city and the county continue just to be out of control with crime. um, and a lot of it is, they have kids that go to school, and they have kids that are young adults, that are operating in these communities, and they want their kids and they want their family members to be safe. So I think that's where we are. And yeah, I mean, I think we're in for an interesting next several months. And then, of course, with the national election, people are a little, on edge about, where we're heading with these changes.
Well, I think that that is a fair statement to say, just a little bit on edge. What does change mean? Change has
Yes.
historically been chaotic for people across the board, even if you are advocating for it or in opposition to the changes. So hopefully
Yes.
positive outcomes ahead.
Yeah.
But I definitely hear you about the accountability piece, right? And so even
Yeah.
we want people are looking for some level of accountability. I am a advocate of the restorative justice model, but I
Yeah.
definitely hear that because Bippin season was a season not
Yeah.
connected to the sun or the moon, but
Yeah.
where a lot of people had their cars vandalized, robbed, broken into. I myself was a victim. My husband was. So I mean, just the common thread around that. And so, yeah,
Yes.
we will definitely see what the future brings in regards
Yeah.
to this um, new space around the change that is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also a big fan of restorative justice. I mean, we had a restorative justice program set up with the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, and had a lot of successful outcomes. And those are just good examples how you can find alternatives to, just sticking someone in the criminal justice system. The whole idea is, how do we keep them out of the system?
Definitely language that I use frequently, for sure, for
Yes,
sure. And just as someone who previously worked on the corrections end of the justice system, I'm definitely an advocate of the accountability as well. I think that there is a balance to justice, much like
there
Lady
is.
Justice is holding the scales that we really have to be accountable and
Yeah,
mindful of as well. All
yes.
right. Well, Mr. Wiley, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for giving the time, the knowledge. Congratulations on the next future chapters for you
Thank
professionally
you.
and otherwise. I'm sure you are going to have immense continued success wherever you go.
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Yeah.
And hey, anytime you need me, I'm there. So I enjoyed talking with you.
Right on, right on. Well, let me just recap really quickly, and then we will finish today. Um,
Okay.
so, thank you again, Mr. Wiley. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to Want More with Dr. Moore, the criminologist of the Bay. If you found this episode informative, please share with a friend, subscribe, and leave a review. As we wrap up today's episode, I would like to thank you, Mr. Terry Wiley, for your willingness to share and all of the information that you imparted on us today. Thank you for tuning in to Want More with Dr. Moore, the criminologist of the Bay. If you found this episode informative, please like it, share with a friend, and subscribe. Until next time, educate, empower, and enact the changes you want to see. Want more.